Snow fell heavy that night, thick white sheets covering the ground like a cold blanket. The wind howled through the trees, sharp and cruel, cutting through thin skin and weak bones. A small figure stumbled forward, her arms wrapped around a child whose body shook with every step. The child's lips had turned blue, and his small hands clutched at his mother's chest, as if afraid she might vanish. Her clothes were torn, barely enough to cover her, and the snow melted on her skin, leaving her shivering. Her eyes searched the distant houses, hoping for a single light of kindness. The first door she knocked on opened just a crack. Warmth spilled out, the smell of cooked food reaching her nose. A tall alien looked down at her, eyes full of disgust. "Not you," he spat, and slammed the door. The woman bit her lip to keep from crying out. She moved to the next house, her legs weak, her child coughing softly in her arms. The second door opened, and a female alien peered out. "Go away," she hissed, her voice sharp as a knife. "You bring bad luck." The door shut with a snap, and snow dusted the woman's shoulders as she turned away. Her breath came in heavy clouds, her strength fading. The child whispered against her chest, "Mama, I'm cold." Her heart broke at the sound. She pulled him closer, but her own body was no warmer than ice. The road stretched long and empty. She remembered the day her clan had thrown her out, calling her useless, saying her child was a burden. They had laughed as she walked away barefoot, and now those same words echoed in her head like poison. She tried one more house, her knuckles weak as they tapped against the wooden door. The door opened, and for a brief second she felt hope. A woman stood there, firelight glowing behind her, but the woman's face twisted into fear. "Leave. You are cursed." The door closed before another word could be spoken. The alien woman stood frozen, her body trembling so hard she thought she might fall. Her child no longer cried, his tiny face pressed against her shoulder, eyes half closed. Panic rushed into her chest. He was not just cold, he was slipping away. She staggered forward, snow blinding her eyes. Her feet, bare and cut, left drops of blood on the white ground. The night was endless, and she wondered if this was where it would all end, in the snow, forgotten, unloved, unseen. She sank to her knees, clutching her child tightly. Her tears froze on her cheeks, mixing with the storm. She whispered into his ear, "Just a little more, my heart. Maybe someone will open the next door." But even she did not believe her own words. The storm grew stronger. Her vision blurred. Houses became shadows, cold and distant. She lifted herself with the last of her strength and walked toward the only light still burning in the distance. A wooden cabin stood at the edge of the village, smoke rising from its chimney. She reached the door and raised her weak hand. Her knock was barely a tap, lost in the howl of the wind. She waited, heart pounding, ready to hear rejection again. The door opened. A tall figure stood there, framed in warm firelight. It was not an alien this time. It was a human. His eyes widened as he saw her, an alien woman with a frozen child in her arms, her body shaking on the edge of collapse. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. She lowered her eyes, expecting him to push her away like the others. She whispered, her voice thin as ice, "Please, only for tonight." The human looked at her, then at the child in her arms. His face hardened, but not with anger, with something else, something she had not seen in years. He stepped aside, and the smell of warmth and wood rushed out to meet her. "Come inside," he said, his voice steady. She hesitated, not trusting, not believing. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Her knees buckled, and she almost fell, but his hands caught her before she could hit the snow. He pulled her inside, shutting the storm away with a heavy slam of the door. The sudden warmth made her dizzy, and the child stirred faintly in her arms. She stared around the room. There was fire in the hearth, blankets on the chair, and bread on the table. It felt like a dream. She clutched the child closer, her fear rising again. Humans were not known for kindness. Some said they were dangerous, selfish, unpredictable. Why would one help her now? The man knelt by the fire, pulling a blanket from the chair. He wrapped it around her shoulders, then another around the child. He placed a hand on the boy's chest, feeling his weak breaths. "He's freezing," the man muttered. His tone carried urgency, not hatred. He moved quickly, pouring warm milk into a small cup, breaking bread into pieces, pushing them toward her. "Eat, both of you." Her hands shook as she touched the bread. She looked at him, searching for the hidden price, the cruel trick. But his eyes were steady, his face calm, No demand came, no insult, no mocking laugh. She placed a piece of bread at her child's lips, and slowly the boy chewed, his weak body finding life again. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She whispered, "Why? Why do this for us?" The human looked at her, his expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. Then he spoke slowly, each word heavy, almost like a promise. Because no one should freeze outside a door. Stay. Not just tonight, stay forever inside. The woman froze, unable to breathe. She stared at him as if the storm itself had paused at his words, forever. No one had ever said that to her, not once. The child sighed softly, warm now, asleep in her arms. She felt her own heart stir for the first time in years, caught between fear and hope. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, for the first time, she felt safe. The smell of firewood lingered in the small cabin as the alien woman sat on the edge of the chair, her arms still wrapped tightly around her child. She could not relax. Her eyes followed the human as he moved about the room, his steps steady, his hands busy with simple tasks. He placed a bowl of steaming stew on the table, its scent filling the air and making her stomach twist with hunger. She had not eaten in days, not properly, but her pride held her back. She feared that the moment she reached out, he would take something in return. The child stirred against her, his small hand rising to point weakly toward the bowl. The human noticed. Without a word, he took a wooden spoon, scooped some of the broth, blew gently to cool it, and held it out toward the boy. The woman's body tensed, ready to snatch her son away, but the boy opened his mouth and swallowed. A faint smile tugged at his lips, and his eyes lit with life she thought was fading forever. She stared in disbelief. No tricks, no conditions, just food. The human leaned back slightly, watching her instead of the child. His eyes were sharp, but not unkind. "Eat," he said firmly, nodding toward the bowl. She shook her head, but her stomach betrayed her with a growl. The sound made her cheeks burn with shame. He pushed the bowl closer, sliding it across the wooden table until it touched her fingers. Her hands trembled as she picked up the spoon. The first taste burned her tongue, but it was rich, full, heavy with warmth. She almost cried at how much it filled her mouth and spread through her body. She ate quickly, almost too quickly, until she remembered where she was and slowed down. The human sat across from her, silent, only watching. She hated the silence. It was too calm, too patient, unlike the world outside. She forced herself to speak, her voice rough and unsure. "Why are you doing this?" He did not answer at first. He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the fire. At last he said, "Because you knocked." The words were simple, almost careless, but they shook her. She had knocked on so many doors. None had opened for her. Only his had. The child, now awake, reached out for another spoonful. The woman fed him carefully, her hands steadying. For the first time in weeks, she heard laughter. It was soft, weak, but it was laughter. Her heart clenched. She had thought she would never hear it again. The sound filled the cabin like music, and even the human's lips curved slightly, though he quickly turned his face back toward the fire. The woman could not understand him. Humans were said to be cold, dangerous, selfish. Her clan had told her so. They had told her never to trust one, never to even stand close to one. Yet here she was, in his home, her child wrapped in his blankets, her stomach full of his food. And he had asked for nothing. That was what scared her the most. Nothing came free. Nothing was ever free. She lowered her gaze to the table, whispering without thinking, "You will send us away tomorrow, won't you?" Her voice cracked as the question left her lips. The human did not answer right away. He reached forward, tore a piece of bread, and placed it in front of her. "Eat," he repeated, as if that was the only answer that mattered tonight. The fire popped, and shadows danced across the cabin walls. She felt those shadows pressing down on her, whispering of betrayal, reminding her of every door that had slammed in her face. Yet here was this man, quiet and steady, who had done none of that. She felt her chest tighten with something strange. Not trust, not yet, but the faintest thread of hope she had buried long ago. The child, warm and full, leaned against her side, his small voice whispering as he drifted into sleep. "Mama, it's warm here." His words pierced her like an arrow. She stroked his hair, her eyes wet, afraid to blink. She did not want to admit it, but her son was right. It was warm here. It was safe here. She looked across the fire at the man, his face half hidden in the glow. She wondered what kind of human he was, what secrets he carried, what reasons lay behind his silence. She wondered if she dared to believe in his words, stay forever inside. She wanted to ask, but the words stuck in her throat. She was too afraid of the answer. The night stretched long, but inside the cabin, the cold world outside no longer existed. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she allowed her eyes to close, her body leaning against the chair. The last thing she saw before sleep pulled her under was the human still sitting by the fire, awake, watching, as if guarding both her and her child. Morning light crept through the small cracks of the wooden cabin, painting faint lines of gold across the floor. The woman stirred awake, her body stiff but warmer than she had been in weeks. Her child still slept beside her, wrapped in blankets, his breathing soft and steady. For a long time she just watched him, afraid that if she blinked he would vanish back into the cold night. She touched his face with trembling fingers and felt warmth, real warmth, still alive. A sharp breath left her chest, half relief, half fear. The sound of movement drew her eyes toward the human. He was already awake, tending the fire, his hands practiced, every motion simple but steady. He did not greet her, did not ask questions, only placed a mug of hot drink on the table before walking toward the door. She sat frozen, her mind battling between suspicion and a strange sense of safety. She pulled the drink closer, the steam rising into her face. The taste was bitter, but it filled her chest with heat. She had almost forgotten what comfort felt like. Her thoughts dragged her backward into the life she had lost. She saw her clan's faces, hard and unyielding, when they had pushed her out. She remembered the council declaring her child a curse, a useless mouth to feed. She remembered begging on her knees, only to feel the dust of the road under her palms as they turned their backs. Her husband's death had sealed their judgment. A widow with a sick child, too much trouble for anyone to bear. That night, when she had walked away with nothing but her son in her arms, she had sworn she would never beg again. Yet here she was, in another man's home, clinging to kindness she did not understand. The human returned, carrying logs for the fire. He placed them down without a word, brushing snow from his shoulders. She watched him closely, trying to read his face. No anger, no impatience, no questions. He acted as though she belonged there, as though her presence required no explanation. That unsettled her more than any threat. Finally, unable to bear the silence, she spoke. "You should know, I am not welcome among my people." He looked at her briefly, then crouched near the fire to stack the logs. "Does that matter here?" he asked, his tone flat. She blinked, unsure she had heard him correctly. He gave her no more than that, as if the subject was closed. She pressed her lips together, her heart pounding. She had expected judgment, disgust, perhaps the same words she had always heard. Instead, she was met with indifference, or perhaps something even stranger, acceptance. Her child stirred and sat up, yawning, rubbing his eyes. The man handed him a piece of bread without hesitation. The boy smiled shyly before eating, crumbs sticking to his small fingers. The woman's eyes burned as she watched. She remembered nights when he had cried himself to sleep with nothing in his stomach, when she had given him the last bite of food while pretending she wasn't hungry. To see him eat so freely now felt like a dream, one she feared waking from. Still, the fear lingered. She tightened her arms around herself and whispered, almost to the fire instead of to him, "If you knew the truth, you would send us away." Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "They said my child is a weakness. They said I am cursed. They said—" Her throat closed before she could finish. The shame of repeating those words was too heavy. The man did not turn toward her. He added another log to the fire, the flames rising with a soft crackle. Then he stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Cold air rushed inside, biting against her skin. Her heart sank, certain this was the moment he would tell her to leave. But instead, he only looked at the snow-covered ground outside and then closed the door firmly again. He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "You're here now. That's enough." She stared at him, her mouth open, her mind blank. She did not know how to answer because she had never heard words like that before. Her people had measured her worth in strength, in usefulness, in obedience. He measured nothing. He simply said it was enough. She lowered her eyes, tears welling, afraid that if she blinked too hard, they would spill over. The boy laughed suddenly as he dropped a crumb on the floor, and the human's dog, silent until now, emerged from under the table to snatch it up. The sound of the child's laughter filled the cabin again, bright and alive. The woman pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed by the sound. Her son was alive. Her son was laughing, and for a moment the weight of her exile felt distant, but doubt whispered still. How long could this last? When would the price reveal itself? She closed her eyes and breathed slowly, her heart torn between fear of betrayal and the fragile hope rising within her. For now, she chose silence, because silence meant the moment was not broken. And for now, in this small cabin with a fire burning strong, it was enough. The smoke rising from the cabin's chimney caught the eyes of the villagers before the sun had fully risen. They gathered in small groups, their whispers sharp as the frost that covered the ground. One of them claimed he had seen the alien woman slip inside during the night. The child clutched against her chest. Another said the human had opened his door willingly, something no sane man would do. By midday, rumors had grown teeth, spreading through the settlement like fire. The woman felt it first when she stepped outside to fetch water. Eyes watched her from a distance, cold and accusing. She kept her head down, clutching the bucket, but their whispers carried clearly in the still air. Cursed. She'll bring misfortune. Why would he take them in? Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the bucket. She hurried back inside, heart pounding, afraid that by simply existing she had already doomed the man who had saved her. He noticed her shaking hands as she set the water down. He asked nothing, but the firmness in his gaze told her he already knew. Later, when he stepped out to chop wood, she pressed her ear to the door, hearing the crunch of boots in snow as villagers approached. Their voices were low, urgent. "You don't know what you've let in," one warned. "She'll bring sickness, hunger, death." Another said, "Send her away before the whole village pays the price." The human's axe struck the wood with a sharp crack. His voice was calm, but it carried like steel. "She stays." The villagers fell silent, stunned by the simplicity of his answer. One spat on the snow in frustration. "Then, when trouble comes, it will fall on your roof." The human said nothing more. He raised the axe again, splitting another log clean in two. The sound echoed through the still air like an unspoken warning. From inside the cabin, the woman's chest tightened. Shame twisted in her stomach. He was defending her, risking his place among his own kind for her and her child. She wanted to tell him to stop, to let her go, to save himself. But when he returned, carrying the wood with steady steps, she could not speak. His face showed no sign of doubt, no crack of fear. He simply placed the logs near the fire and continued as if nothing had happened. That night, the tension pressed heavier than the snow on the roof. The woman sat by the fire, her child asleep in her lap, while the man worked quietly at the table, mending a broken chair leg. The silence stretched until she could not bear it. "They hate me," she whispered. "They will hate you too." He did not look up. "Let them." She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "You don't understand. They will make you suffer for me." His hands paused for the briefest moment before tightening on the wood. "They cannot make me do anything. My door is mine. My fire is mine. Who I keep safe is my choice." He finally raised his eyes to hers, the firelight reflecting in them like embers. "They cannot take that from me." Her breath caught, her heart pounding against her ribs. No one had ever spoken for her like this, without hesitation, without shame. She wanted to argue, to insist that he would regret it, but the words died on her tongue. For the first time, she began to wonder if he might truly mean what he had said that night. Stay forever inside. Outside, the villagers still whispered, their suspicion growing with every passing hour. But inside the cabin, a fragile defiance was taking root, built from firelight, bread, and the steady voice of a man who refused to close his door. The child's laughter filled the cabin, light and unexpected, bouncing off the wooden walls as if the house itself had come alive. He sat on the floor, chasing a small wooden toy the human had carved from leftover scraps. The woman watched him with wide eyes, her chest aching at the sound. She had almost forgotten what joy looked like on his face, forgotten the sparkle that once lived in his eyes. Now, wrapped in warmth and fed, he laughed so hard he fell onto his back, giggling until tears touched his cheeks. The human sat nearby, sharpening a blade, the steady scrape of metal against stone mixing with the child's laughter. He glanced up once, and though his face stayed calm, his lips pressed into the faintest curve. He had built the toy without a word, leaving it by the boy's side as if it were nothing. But it was not nothing. To the boy, it was treasure. To the mother, it was proof of something she could not yet name. She sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, watching the two of them. The warmth that spread in her chest frightened her. It felt fragile, dangerous. It whispered of belonging, of safety, of a home she'd been taught she did not deserve. Her clan's words still haunted her, a burden, a curse, a mistake. She had believed them for so long that hope itself felt like a trap. Yet every day in this cabin made it harder to believe their cruelty. The child crawled to her, clutching the toy tightly, like his voice high with excitement. "Mama, look, he made this for me." His smile was wide, innocent, full of trust. She kissed his forehead, her throat tight, unable to form words. The boy wriggled free again, running toward the firelight where the man now stood, placing wood into the flames. The boy tugged at his sleeve, holding up the toy proudly. "It flies," he said, throwing it into the air. The clumsy block of wood clattered to the floor, and he laughed again. The human crouched to meet his eyes, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "Then make it fly again," he said simply, handing it back. The boy nodded eagerly, as though he had been given the greatest command in the world. The woman turned her face away, blinking hard. A dangerous thought took root. What if this was what family felt like? The sound of her child's joy, the steady presence of a man who asked for nothing, the warmth of a fire that never went out. It was too easy to imagine, too easy to want, and wanting was dangerous. That evening, as the boy fell asleep on the rug near the fire, she sat in the shadows, watching the human. He moved with quiet purpose, checking the windows, locking the door, setting tools back in their place. Every action was careful, protective, as though he had already accepted them as part of his life. She wanted to ask why. She wanted to demand an answer, but her lips would not move. Instead, she whispered to herself, "This cannot last." The words sounded hollow even to her ears, because in that moment she wanted it to last more than anything she had ever wanted. The fire crackled, the boy slept peacefully, and the man finally sat down, leaning back against the chair. His eyes closed, though his hand rested on the knife at his side, ready even in rest. She stared at him for a long time, torn between fear and gratitude, between the life she had known and the one unfolding in front of her. The cabin was quiet, safe, and warm. Yet in her chest, a storm of doubt raged louder than the blizzards outside. If peace had truly found her, then it could only mean danger was already on its way. The storm arrived without warning. One moment the night was still, the next the wind screamed against the walls of the cabin, rattling the shutters and shaking the roof. Snow pounded like fists against the wood, piling high outside until the windows turned white. The woman pressed her child close, her heart racing with every violent gust. She had lived through many storms in the wild, but never one this fierce. She looked to the human, waiting for fear to show on his face, but he only moved with quiet focus, feeding the fire, checking the beams, securing the door with heavy iron latches. Hours passed, and the storm did not ease. The food stores grew thin. Only a few loaves of bread, a small sack of dried meat, and half a pot of stew remained. She tried to eat less, hiding bites so her child could have more, but the human caught her every time. Without speaking, he pushed food toward her, his eyes sharp, refusing her sacrifice. She resented him for seeing through her, yet some hidden part of her felt relief. As the storm howled louder, the fire dimmed. She rushed forward to add more wood, but the pile was nearly gone. Her hands shook as she placed the last logs on the flames, watching them spark and crackle, knowing it would not last the night. Her body trembled, not only from cold but from the weight of dread. The memory of exile pressed against her chest, the endless snow, the faces that had turned away. She could not relive that again. She could not watch her child suffer another night like that. Her voice broke through the silence, sharp with fear. "You should not have let us stay. We will only bring you ruin." The words spilled out before she could stop them. She clutched her son tighter, her eyes shining in the firelight. "When the food is gone, when the fire dies, you will regret it." The man looked at her for a long time. He did not argue, did not scold. Instead, he knelt before her, his presence filling the space between them. His hands were rough and scarred, yet gentle as he placed them over hers, steadying the grip she had on her child. His voice was low, but it cut through the roar of the storm like a blade. Listen to me. This is your home now. The storm can rage all it wants. It will not take you away. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. His words struck deeper than any she had ever heard. Home. He called this place her home, as if it was already hers, as if she had the right to claim it. Tears blurred her vision, but she tried to hide them, afraid to show weakness. Still, her body leaned into his warmth, unable to stop herself. The storm pounded harder, the walls groaning under the weight of snow, but his steady grip anchored her. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a tomorrow. Not out in the cold, not begging at closed doors, but here, in this cabin, with fire, with food, with someone who did not turn her away. Her child stirred in her arms, mumbling in his sleep, pressing closer into the blanket. She kissed his hair, her lips trembling, then looked up at the man still kneeling before her. She wanted to ask why he would risk this, why he would call strangers family, but no words came, only silence, heavy with everything left unsaid. Outside, the blizzard showed no mercy. Inside, she felt the faintest spark of something stronger than the storm. It terrified her as much as it warmed her. The thought that, perhaps after everything, she had finally found a place she belonged. The storm broke with the morning sun, leaving the world outside buried in silence. Snow lay thick across the village, roofs bent under the weight, paths lost beneath endless white. Smoke curled from chimneys, but all eyes turned to the cabin at the edge of the settlement. Word had spread too far to be contained. By midday, a group of villagers marched through the snow, their breath clouding in the cold, their voices hard with purpose. Inside, the woman felt it before she saw them. The air grew tense, heavy. She pulled her child close, her heart hammering. Through the frosted window, she saw their figures approaching, men and women wrapped in furs, carrying more hatred than warmth. Her stomach twisted. She knew what they wanted. They had not accepted her before, and they would not now. Her son stirred against her chest, whispering, "Mama, don't let them take me." She kissed his hair, though her lips trembled too much to answer. The door shook under the villagers' fists. "Send them out!" one voice roared. "They don't belong here. She's cursed, and the child is worse. Do not bring their doom upon us all." More voices rose, pressing like the storm that had only just passed. The woman shrank back into the corner, her nails digging into the blanket around her child. She waited for the human to falter, to open the door, to hand them over in exchange for peace. It was what anyone else would have done. Instead, he rose from his chair, slow and deliberate, and walked to the door. He did not open it. He only stood there, his broad back between her and the pounding fists. His voice came steady, calm but unyielding. "No." The banging grew louder. "If you shelter them, their curse becomes yours," shouted another. "If they stay, we will cut you off." But his voice did not waver. "This is my home. No one I shelter will be thrown into the snow." The cabin fell into silence, broken only by the child's quiet whimper and the fire's crackle. At last he opened the door himself, stepping outside into the blinding light. The cold hit him, but his stance did not shift. The villagers glared, waiting for weakness, for fear, but he gave them none. He spread his arms slightly, not as a plea, but as a barrier. "If they go, I go. If you want them out, you'll carry me out too." The words cut through the crowd sharper than steel. Some muttered, some lowered their eyes, but none stepped forward. The snow crunched as the villagers shifted uneasily. One spat into the white and turned away. Another growled under his breath, but followed. Slowly, one by one, the crowd broke apart, leaving the man standing alone in the still air. The village had given its answer. They would not fight him, not today. He closed the door behind him, the weight of the outside world shut out once more. The woman sat frozen, tears streaking her cheeks, unable to move. She had expected rejection, betrayal, but he had chosen the harder path. He had chosen her. Her child stirred again, eyes wide as he whispered, "Mama, he saved us." She looked up at the man standing by the fire, his face unreadable in the glow. Her voice cracked as she finally spoke the words she had never dared to believe. "Then forever, we stay." The child pressed closer into her arms, safe. The man gave a single nod, as if sealing a promise, and the fire roared higher, filling the cabin with light that no storm and no hatred could dim.